let's talk about the best and the worst beast cards of all time. That's right. There's been a lot of beasts in Hearthstone, and there's been a lot of good beasts, meta-defining beasts, and there's been some stinker beasts too. So we're going to run through each of those. That said, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this video, Squarespace, the ultimate website building tool. We'll talk about them a little bit more later on. But for now, let's jump into the worst beasts of all time. Starting off here at the number 5 spot with Warlock's Death Web Spider, a card you don't really consider much of a beast. Its beast tag feels very incidental. I considered not including cards like that, but at the end of the day, it's a beast, and it's really, really bad. You might say, hey, wait a minute, Regis, this is a 5-mana 4/6, and it can have lifesteal. That's not that bad. Those stats are fine. It is that bad. Let's get real with ourselves here. This card never got played, first off. It's just miserable. There were some Pain Warlocks that had these conditional if damaged effects that didn't really take off anyway until, the Dark Glare era more recently, after this card had already rotated. Even then, this wouldn't have fit into that game plan at all, because this card is all about stabilization and healing, and it's not about pressure and follow-up, which, of course, Dark Glare Warlocks wanted pressure. They wanted to dump 8/8 Flesh Giants, not 4/6 lifesteal beasts that only sometimes have lifesteal. So sometimes this is like a 7-mana 4/6 where you have to life tap first, and you're like, oh, man. And lifesteal just doesn't really matter much because you're planning to end the game. So, like, yes, the theory here is, like, I take a bunch of damage early, I play this late, and it heals me up, and I'm happy. The reality is, if you take that much time trying to shift your game plan to, like, staying alive, this card just doesn't make sense. There are so many other better options that heal you while still creating pressure. Think about Life Drinker, for instance, in this exact same expansion. Another amazing beast, by the way, that dealt damage and healed you simultaneously. So it just fit much, much better into that game plan. Even lately, we have cards like Nether Breath that deal damage and heal you, or can clear stuff and heal you, as opposed to this card, which just passively sits there, takes forever to interact with anything, and feels really, really slow in the meantime. Moving on to the number 4 spot, it's Core Hound. Just a basic, bland, boring card, of course. It's a 9/5. It's big, but it's really that 5 health that keeps Core Hound from ever making any sense. I mean, any just vanilla stat dump card like this is pretty bad, but it's much worse than even like War Golem in the same classic set, because that balance between having higher health and attack makes way more sense than having this super low attack value, which is much easier for a variety of spells and minions to clear easily. So you almost feel bad including cards like this one because it's so obviously weak and non-impactful, and nobody's ever going to play this in a deck. But it still has to be recognized just how weak it is, and cards like this are a real good reason and a reminder why the classic and basic sets probably need to be re-envisioned, and Buzzard has teased sorts of re-envisionings of the classic and basic set. So I hope a card like Core Hound, which is so bad, does in fact get changed somehow. Next up at the number 3 spot, oh god, what have I done? You guys are gonna hate me, but it's Ultrasource, man. I love him so much, but he's just slow, guys. He's a 7/14. He doesn't have any rush or any taunt. He's just a big fatty, and big fatties like this at 10 mana don't work in Hearthstone. You don't have time to play these things. Even when he gets like summoned off random stuff, you're excited because it's Ultrasource, but you're disappointed because it's a 7/14 and it didn't really do much of anything. So sad to say, as much as I love the guy and as much as we've memed on him, Ultrasource is not a very good card. That stings. I have the number 2 spot. This one actually maybe stings more. It's Hyrik the Bat. I thought this card was going to be solid, man. We had that, Rosticon hand buff stuff happening in Warlock. I thought, oh man, this is going to be like an 8-mana 5/5. It summons a full board. That's going to be so crazy. Turns out that package was a little bit awkward to run. You have to have Hyrik in hand in time, and then he's a dead card sitting there. So it never really came together despite my best efforts, and certainly the meta never got it there. And ultimately, he usually ended up being an 8-mana 1/1 top deck. That was just way too weak, way too slow for Warlock's game plan, and just didn't make enough impact. Way worse than cards like Onyxia or Shuma, for instance, in many cases. And those aren't even particularly amazing cards in their own right. Of course, there's like the Bandersmash Hyrik stuff that was amazing and awesome, and it's cool that Hyrik existed. But as a card himself, really pretty darn bad. One of the worst Loas, in fact, and there weren't even that many good Loas or Rosticon cards in general, and somehow still this managed to become a meme for just how weak it's been. So, gosh, Hyrik, I'm sorry, dude. But the number one spot, the worst beast ever, it's Silverback Patriarch. How many times has this thing been eclipsed by other cards? We've got 3 mana, 3/4 beast in Warrior. Fierce Monkey was a fine card, not even that amazing, right? And it's just 1,000 times better than Silverback Patriarch. We've got so many different minions that eclipse this in so many different ways. Higher attacks, higher healths. Maybe they don't have the beast minion type always. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're class cards. Sometimes they're not. But ultimately, this always falls short compared to so many different cards. There's like a list of like 30 cards that have in one way or another just completely power crept Silverback Patriarch. And yes, I know people out there on YouTube, it's not power creep by your definition if he never got played. I'm not making a value statement about power creep. I'm just describing that he's been surpassed statistically in a variety of fashions throughout the years. And he's just really, really weak. Even really Iron Fur Grizzly's a dramatically better card in the same basic set than Silverback Patriarch. So he can't even beat the people he came out with, let alone the next 5 years of cards following him up. He's sadly very, very weak. What's not weak, though, is our sponsor for this video, Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace since, I think, 2008, which is a ridiculously long time. It's been a great tool for building a variety of websites throughout my life. They'll have everything you need to make a great website, from analytics to e-commerce tools, commenting features, and of course, lots of styles and templates to make sure your site looks amazing. So head to squarespace.com to start a free trial, play around a little bit. Then when you're ready to launch your site, head over to squarespace.com/Regis for 10% off with the code Regis. You can get that website or domain a little bit more affordably, and that's a really great deal. So that said, let's talk about our 5 best beasts. Starting off here with Stone Tusk Boar, and this one's going to be a little bit of a brave inclusion, and in fact, I think a lot of people are going to think all 5 of my best beasts are a little bit bold, or maybe 3 of them at least. But for Stone Tusk Boar, I have an argument here. It's that he's just popped into a lot of different decks over the years as a OTK finisher in many cases, but also in things like Quest Rogue, which was so meta dominant for a while and really relied on cards like Stone Tusk Boar to create those high damage, high pressure scenarios in the late game, just ending games with, you know, a few 4 damage Stone Tusk Boars. We've also seen crazy stuff like Test Subject Priest with absurd Stone Tusk Boars. That may not have been a super meta relevant deck, but still a pretty crazy inclusion. And because Stone Tusk Boars popped into so many different lists like that, and some stuff that was truly meta defining like Quest Rogue, I kind of thought I had to honor it here with one of these spots. This is, you know, there could be 10 different cards that go in this slot, I think. But I wanted to give Stone Tusk Boar a little bit of love. So I'm curious to hear if you think he deserves that spot or not. Let me know. I'm sure this one's going to have a lot of discussion. So next up, this one might even be more debatable. It's Starving Buzzard. And I know what you're thinking, like, wait a minute. I haven't seen Starving Buzzard in like 15 years, Regis, and it's not been that long, but it may feel like it. But in particular, I want to talk about the OG version of Starving Buzzard, or at least one of the OG versions of Starving Buzzard. And maybe this is a little bit of personal bias, but when I first came into Hearthstone, this card, which was, you know, during the start of Hearthstone, during the pre-Naxxramas era, this card was absolutely bonkers for a while. And that's why it's such a bad card today, is because it was so absurd with Unleash the Hounds and all the crazy shenanigans Hunter could do to draw you 5-6 cards, reload, and just own people. Hunter was so dominant in that era with Undertaker Hunter. This card just felt like unbeatable. It felt so strong. When a card gets nerfed that hard, I think it has to be recognized a little bit that somebody out there thought it was OP. So although its lifespan was short and it hasn't been seen in a while, I still wanted to give it the nod here. Feel free to trash me in the comments for that very decision. So next up here is Beak Owl. What? Another weird choice here. Everybody's like, where's Savannah Highmane Regis? I want them big beasts. No, it's Beak Owl, and another card that got nerfed. And, you know, I think nerfed cards deserve recognition. There's a reason they're getting nerfed. For Iron Beak Owl, though, of course, this was just everywhere. It was the ultimate silence effect in Hearthstone. And, you know, once it got nerfed to 3 mana, Spellbreaker became the ultimate silent effects. Even Spellbreaker got Hall of Famed because that was such an important part of the meta. And imagine having a 2 mana cheaper version of Iron Beak Owl. It was in everything. Every deck needed an Iron Beak Owl. Aggro decks, of course, wanted to push through taunts and just go face. Even control decks sometimes needed cards like this to answer threats. And everybody played it because it's just so cheap, so flexible. The stat downside was small for the huge silence upside. So, you know, you didn't mind having this little speed bump on board because you're getting such an awesome silence effect. In Hunter, it had additional beast synergies that mattered. So, yeah, Iron Beak Owl got nerfed. It's certainly not as good today. And in fact, silence effects in general aren't probably as good today as they used to be because we just have way more removal options in general and rush minions everywhere. So just pushing through stuff is often easier than silencing it. So this card may not feel impactful at the moment or lately, but man, there was an era of Hearthstone where this one was absolutely everywhere. Moving on to the number 2 spot here, it's Baku the Moon Eater. He is indeed a beast, or she is a beast, and she's a really good one to define the meta, of course, in the Witchwood era. Odd decks everywhere out there with getting Greymane and even decks, but odd decks still seemed more predominant. Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue, etc. And even in wild format today, Baku still makes an enormous impact on the meta. Odd Paladin still strong deck in wild format. So it's really hard to debate that this is one of the best cards ever in the history of Hearthstone. Total. It doesn't even have to be limited to Beast specifically. Baku is just absolutely insane, super powerful card. And you might be wondering, what's number 1? What could possibly beat Baku the Moon Eater? Well, I have a very convincing answer. It's Corridor Creeper, and really the old version of Corridor Creeper, the 5/5 version of Corridor Creeper, was absolutely everywhere. Completely reshaped Hearthstone before it got nerfed because everybody was playing 0 mana 5/5s super early in the game, and that completely changes how the game works. If you drew your Corridor Creeper early, you won. If you didn't draw your Corridor Creeper early, you lost. It was just completely obscene how impactful this card was. Reached unheard of play rates, right up there with cards like Ziliax. And of course, it got nerfed super hard, pushing it down to 2/5. It still got played as a 2/5 in many cases, and things like Odd Paladin, I think maybe even still runs it in Wild today. The last time I saw one, I think they had it. So still a good card in many cases, even after it lost 3 attack. But I just can't explain how important this card was as a 5/5. It was everywhere. It just completely dominated. Every deck list ran it, it seemed. So it had to be number 1 for me. As important and as awesome as Baku is, and there's probably a great argument for Baku at number 1, I think Corridor Creeper was just too strong and played everywhere, whereas Baku was at least limited to specific kinds of decks, and you had to build around it. Corridor Creeper, just toss it in and you're good to go. It was absurd, and for me, the best beast of all time. And there you go. That wraps it up for this video. Again, these decisions are so subjective, guys. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Reshuffle my list, swap cards out, tell me what you think. I want to hear it all. This is just, of course, my opinion, my memory. I use some stats and deck lists to guide me a little bit, but ultimately still just how I perceive the game to be. So you have different perceptions. Share those in the comments below. In the meantime, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Be sure to check out that link in the description below to learn more and get yourself a great website. But until then, thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.